Welcome to the Buildwriting podcast, the show where we explore creativity, writing, and the stories that connect us. I'm your host, Oyemichi Noah Konam. Today I'm joined by James Beaumont, a British actor and voice artist who has spent years bringing other people's words to life on stage, on screen, and behind the mic. Recently, James stepped into a new territory, not just performing, but writing his own stories and turning them into an audio fiction podcast called 31 Stories. His journey from actor to storyteller shows us how prompts, discipline, and curiosity can spark something entirely new. Let's dive into the conversation with James. For someone meeting you for the first time, how would you introduce yourself?
So my name's James. I'm a British actor, and that really is what I am. It's interesting to be invited onto your writer's podcast because I really don't think of myself as a writer. I'm an actor. I'm a voice artist, but I'm surrounded by great writers and great writing all the time. Obviously, as that's a part of the job. So I was inspired to give it a try myself. Yeah.
Or are you usually the guy who brings other people's writing to life?
Exactly.
Yeah, you play the character. I watched some of your the trailer, right? So I had to go do some detective work, and I was like, wow. I wasn't really sure if I've watched the movie, but the movie just it felt familiar, but I knew that I haven't watched it. The one where I think it had the prison scene. It was a fantasy movie where a creature, yeah.
Yeah.
Remember
possibly Carnival Row, maybe. Was I a policeman? I play a lot of policemen. But this was the fantasy policeman role. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
are you a policeman in real life?
I'm not. I'm not. I'm actually incredibly soft and gentle, but I don't look like it. So I get cast as these tough guys, but it goes against type a little bit.
Wow. I probably should watch the movie because I was curious. I was like, oh, what happened to the creature there? Did they later find the creature? Because
Yeah.
Like, wow, okay. Once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm delighted to have a conversation about the project you worked on. When did you start this? Like, what led to you saying, okay, I'm going to, what was the event that led to you saying you're going to start the project? That's the podcast.
Yeah. So, well, it started with writing it, obviously. But the reason I wanted so the podcast, the project as it is at the moment, is a short form audio fiction. It's almost like little mini audiobooks. The episodes are sort of 6 to 10 minutes each. And they're based on these short stories that I wrote in January last year, based on your prompts. That was why I reached out to you, just to say, I've done this thing. You inspired me. Thank you. And you were very gracious to get back to me. But the reason I went looking for the prompts in the first place was in 2023, a good friend of mine wrote his first novel, and I was so impressed. The idea that you could sit down and write this huge, sprawling fantasy sci-fi thing. And he asked me to read it, and I thought it was great. And when I read it, I said, can I do the audiobook? Are you doing an audiobook? Can I do the audiobook? And he agreed, and I did that. And it just got me thinking that I wanted to have a go myself. So, new year, new year's resolutions, new ideas. So I thought, well, why not do it in January? I bet somebody has come up with writing prompts for every day of January. And sure enough, someone had, and that someone was you. And so every day, 2024 in January, I decided to write at least 1,000 words for each of the prompts. And they turned into these short stories. And then they sat in not actually in a drawer, just on my hard drive for a year. And when it got to January this year, 2025, I thought I'd like to do it again. So I did it again. But I also thought it would be nice to share the stories I already had. And I've got the equipment, I've got the know-how. It's the bit I actually know how to do, really. It's not writing the stories, but reading them. So I thought, well, why not do it? It's possible to host podcasts for free. Everything is relatively straightforward nowadays. So that's what I did. And Yeah, I've just reached the end of the first season. The show, I called it 31 Stories. I kept it simple.
Yeah.
Every week, every Sunday, I released a new story, and we've just reached the end of the first season. And 2 weeks ago, I think, I started the second. I've started recording the next batch, the next round. So that brings us up to today. I'm just sort of slowly working my way through recording and editing and uploading. Yeah.
I said the latest episode is it's called Day 2 Bling. That's the second
Yes.
batch, the one you wrote in 2025.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh.
So I hope you won't be upset, but I did take my prompts from a different website in
No,
2025.
why would why when the moment you said I hope you will not be upset, I was expecting something really bad. I was like, oh, what has
Well,
he
that
done?
feels bad to me. Yeah. But no, I thought I thought I would just try somewhere else and see if it would do something else. And actually, this second time, rather than a word count, I wanted to write them by hand. I just want to make life difficult for myself. So the second time around, I set a page count in an actual physical notebook, and I wrote 3 A4 pages, which actually strangely works out at almost about 1,000 words again, maybe a little bit less each time. But then I did it again this year, and so now the podcast has now rolled around to that second batch. But all of your prompts, all the stories that were your prompts, are existing episodes that are out there that people can go and listen to.
Yeah, the strange thing is that if you search for the name of my podcast, your podcast ranks like like in Spotify, Apple, and I'm like, wow, that's strange. Why would 31 stories be ranking for my podcast? And it's because you use the word Buildwriting when you link to the place where you got the prompt for. So it pops up when people search for Buildwriting. And thank you for putting it out there. I feel really, really grateful and happy.
Oh well, I'm glad. I mean, to me, it was a no-brainer. In the show notes of every episode, I've put the link to the post from your website, and also to the person who created the music for each episode, so that seems like seems fair to credit everybody where it's due.
Yeah, for me, I've always loved the idea of not just writing but bringing things to life. And that's one of the reasons why I like spoken words, right? Because, you write poetry and then you perform it and bring it to life. And it's not just reserved for people who, quote unquote, the elites, the people who actually want to read a book or read a story, which there's nothing wrong with reading. But I like the whole idea is we have a message, we have a story to share. And so we should bring it to the people. And I love what you did with the audio fiction. I feel like the fiction podcast, the fiction narrations, I could say they're not that popular, right? Because it takes a lot of work.
You mean to make them or to listen to them?
To make them.
To make them. Yeah. It does take a lot of work. And I mean, I stripped the process down as much as I possibly could. I think they're quite rudimentary in a way that it's just me. It's got the same music sting at the beginning and end of every episode. I don't have a sound effect, so I'm not trying to make radio plays. It really is an audio book experience. But it is a lot of work. There's the novel that I mentioned that my friend wrote, that runs to, I think it's nearly 16 hours as the finished product. So I must have spent at least 2 or 3 times that long actually recording it, you know, with all of the fluff takes and everything. So it does take a lot of work. But what I've discovered, because strangely, I don't actually listen to audiobooks. I'm not the biggest fan of audiobooks. I like to read. I do listen to a lot of podcasts and things like that, but audiobooks, I don't know, not so much. But I've discovered that there are so many short fiction and audiobook podcasts out there. There is such a huge demand for it, and I guess it just comes down to how do you like to get your stories, right? Some people do like to read them. Some people love to watch them. Some people need to see live actors in a theater, and I guess some people like to have us in their ears when they're doing the washing up or driving the car or whatever. So it's nice to provide that option for people who enjoy it that way.
Yeah, you mentioned radio plays. You has the thought of, oh, I could probably make a radio play, has it crossed your mind while you were working on this project?
Yeah, I mean, I've done radio plays in the past, and they're so much fun. I'm sure you know, there's the whole art form of creating soundscapes for audio fiction, and the tools they use, the ways that they make sound effects, the way that they create, the way that they can create a space and it's a trick, really. They trick your brain into thinking I'm actually on an aeroplane or I'm standing in a field. But no, it's always an actor standing in a studio somewhere. But somehow they can, I find that the science of that is fascinating, that acoustic science where it meets creativity and artistry. I am not that good, but if I had the opportunity to work on more radio plays, I would love to. But sadly, I mean, podcasting is where it is, right? I don't think people listen to radio plays on the radio so much anymore. At least I don't think there's so much demand for it. But it's moved to Spotify, it's moved to Apple Podcasts, it's moved online, and people are making stuff because it is so much fun. But it is a lot of work, as you say.
Yeah, I guess while I'm looking at your work and I'm just saying, okay, I guess one of these days, one of the powers he has not touched is being a producer, because you just produced your podcast from season one. Now you're working on season two. I do podcasts, right? I have multiple podcasts, so I know what it takes to to record, to put things in order, to release, and all the behind the scenes to actually get it out there.
Yeah. I mean, I again, in the way that I would hesitate to call myself a writer, even though I've written a load of stuff. I would hesitate to call myself a producer, even though I am producing a podcast.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun. I mean, that's probably a very cliche thing to say, but because it's such a lot of work, there's no way you could do it without enjoying it. So I guess on some level, yeah, maybe there is a little producer hiding inside of me that wants to make this stuff. And I don't know, maybe I'm a bit of a perfectionist. It's nice for me to take it right from the beginning, right to the very end, from the written word on the page all the way to the WAV file that I upload to the internet. It's nice to be involved at every step of the way and to learn. I've had to learn about normalization and compression and all of this stuff that I had no idea about before. I still don't really have much of an idea about it, but I'm getting there gradually, very slowly.
With the way you worked on these stories now, with what you explained at the beginning, the timeline of this project was you wrote the stories and you're like, okay, it will be fun if I turn it into an audio fiction podcast. And then you started recording and you released the episodes. But now that you've worked on the stories and you've recorded them, if you were to approach writing this kind of stories to continue the project, do you think your approach towards writing the stories will change? Since you've read them out loud and it's, the experience is quite different from just writing and...
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think there's two parts to it, because this January, when I was writing this next batch of stories, I didn't actually think of making the podcast until, I think it was in January, but it was towards the second half of January, and I maybe didn't actually start recording until maybe right at the very end of January. But if I were to do it again next year, then I can't help but think I might be thinking of the podcast as I'm writing the stories, and I don't know whether that would help or not. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that I think if I were to do it again, and I mentioned it, there's a sort of a bonus episode, a little introductory episode before the beginning of the second season. I talk about how I don't know if I'll do it again next January, but if I did, what I might do is turn that mechanism to create something different. So rather than 31 short stories, what if I tried to write one larger story broken up into 31 days?
Yeah.
Because I know that you're a poet, right? And a lot of your work and this podcast that I've listened to is often about poetry. Poetry is something that I admire from afar. I'm sure you've heard that a lot. Obviously, that it's something I really have. I feel I have very little experience with, very little knowledge with, and so I would feel very hesitant about attempting poetry. But why not? I guess I'm just more of a long form type reader. I naturally, again, like I was saying, to be able to work on something, if you can enjoy it, then it won't feel like work. And with my writing, as much as I can, I've always tried to write the things that I think I would like to read, because what other gauge do I have other than if I like it, then maybe somebody else will like it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't want to try and write something for somebody else. I can only
Yeah.
write it for myself.
Yeah. I think one of the things about writing stories for yourself is, and this is something I've experienced too, is because when you write stories for yourself, writing the story gives you fulfillment. And it's not a question of, oh, I hope someone likes the story. If they like it, it's good. If they don't like it, it's not good. Because if they don't like it, that's not a problem, because you've written the story, you love the story, and you wrote the story because you love to write the story, and that's it. Right now, if it changes the word, great. But if it not, life goes on. It's not a big deal. Rather than, oh, I read the story, I hope the world likes it. And if the world doesn't like it, you're like, oh, I'm terrible. I hate this. My life is this. Why I probably shouldn't be writing.
Must happen a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, recently, what even happened to me was like, I was about to give a speech, on a gathering, and I do podcast. I talk to strangers all the time. It's not a big deal. My tongue doesn't freeze. I don't have this heart beating. Why am I scared now? And I was like, oh, it's for a grade. If I don't talk well, my grade might not. I'm scared that things might not work out. And I was like, I see why. I see why. Yeah. I loved what you did with the work, because it just goes on to show a lot of things. First of all, the technology has made it's still hard, but it has made it easier compared to the past.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it is still hard, as you say.
Yeah, but it's made it easier, because 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when I was creating content and putting things out there, I knew the softwares, the technologies, and all those things you had to use to make those things. But now there's AI that can edit, cut out some ums and all those things for you and put it out there. Earlier on, you mentioned venturing into poetry, and I'm curious, right? I'm curious what it would look like to create a performative art, right? The reason I say performative art is, in quiet times, I used to think, what would it look like if we mix music, mix poetry, mix drama, mix play, mix everything together and create something really beautiful, right? Because there are radio plays, there are audio fictions, there are all these things out there, but they're not really, how explained, they're not really there. And it would be nice to see what that writing would look like. Because now it's a little bit different from, I'm writing a play, I'm writing a story. It's a question of, I'm writing something I love, and let's see what it turns out to be.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're describing some sort of collaboration, maybe between different types of artists right at the beginning. Or you'd need to be some kind of great auteur who is a poet and a musician and a producer. And blah, 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 blah.
Well, that's true. That would be fun to explore and say, try music, try this, or collaborate between a musician. A musician will do the intro songs, or probably, in the spoken word, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If you know what spoken word is, right?
As in spoken word poetry.
Yeah. Okay, you do the spoken word, and when you say a certain line, right? And you're like, okay, yeah. I always think of William Shakespeare, because all his plays, their poetry, his dialogues are poetic, and like to be or not to be, that is the question. And you're like, and then when they say that, there's this vocal chorus voice behind that says to be and not to be, like something like that. And then you just keep on going. It will be fun to see what that would look like, because now because I'm always thinking, it's not an idea of creating category. Let's make something that is beautiful. It doesn't have to fit into a box. It doesn't have to be, it's an audio fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. And you put me on, you talk about Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It puts me in mind of generally of theatre in the pre-Enlightenment, the pre-literate ages, when people couldn't read, and also theatre, drama, poetry wasn't designed to be quote unquote realistic. The idea of the hyper realist kind of Stanislavskian Hollywood type, where we're aiming for making something as believable as what we would meet in the real world as possible. That in itself is a style. It's a bit of a myth as well, actually, because what I see, we could both be looking at the same event in the street, and we could remember it very differently. We could see it very, very differently. I mean, naturally I come to a lot of these things as an actor, because that's my profession. And if we spend too much time with the word on the page in black and white, this hyper intellectualized left hemisphere thinking type way of approaching art, it can become quite dead, and it becomes too much in the head. If we think about art as a whole body, we're whole body beings. We live in our whole bodies. We experience things through our bodies, rather than thinking as we do in the modern world that we're just a brain that is being served by these organs that just, they're just sort of in the way. Wouldn't it be great if we were just brains in jars?
Yeah.
We're physical beings, and we experience the world physically, and that would extrapolate to hearing the spoken word, feeling the rhythm of music as it's being performed, seeing bodies move, maybe even being pushed around and touched by performers as you move around. We've lost a lot of that in the modern world, where everything is in black and white, everything is intellectualized, everything is brain-led, rather than kind of body-led. So if you were to come up with a project that was bringing lots of artists together, I think it would be great. You put them all in a room and you're like, just go at it, guys. Just do what feels good, right?
Yeah. Let's just have fun.
Don't think about it.
Do what you'd listen to and not scream.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all it's required. Because at the end of the day, we're going to watch or listen to the project. And I don't want anybody to say, ah! And then if you do that, that means that you just did a terrible job. But if you love what you've created, that's a great job. The reason I bring this up is because with AI, back in the day when AI newly came out, we were like, oh, well, AI cannot exactly write a story. And that was then. But now...
Well, it can't really, right? It's still pretty bad, isn't it? If you give a prompt, no?
You could tell it right in the style of William Shakespeare, and it will spawn out all those things for you. So now in this day and age, it's important that people beyond just writing the stories will bring out the life to the stories, right? And that's why I like spoken word, because with spoken word you can bring those feelings into it. You can say, oh, and there are ways you can really display these things out there. And so it's not just, it's an embodiment, right? As an actor, you understand what this means. It's not just the write-up, it's an embodiment of what that story is trying to tell. And people can see and perceive this, especially when it's live performance. Of course, in via video and all that, they can see it, but people can connect with it differently versus when it's on the page. And I feel that that's very important. People should go beyond the page and get the story to reach whoever they're trying to reach.
I couldn't agree more. We're so good at reading people. We're evolutionarily, we're much, much better at reading people than we are at reading books. We're talking about a couple of 100 years versus millions of years. And so there is no real replacement for experiencing stories told by people. And without wanting to get too big-headed, as the reader who's reading his own stories, as I'm sure is often the case with spoken word poetry, right? The idea is, I assume that it's the poet that reads their own stories. That is the person whose words they are, and so they understand it. I mean, in theory, they should understand it better than anyone else, and they can communicate the story in a million unconscious ways with their body that would not be possible on the page. Of course, literacy and sharing work through the written word has obviously helped people experience things they wouldn't be able to experience in person. Yeah. But if you have that opportunity, then there's no doubt. And even if somebody in the audience starts screaming and say, oh God, no, this is awful, well, then you can react to that. And at least then you're having a conversation, an actual conversation.
Yeah. I think, in poetry, there's what they call poetic license. It's basically being able to use words and mash up words the way you want just because you're a poet, right? Versus if someone else tried to say that, you're like, oh, you that's not the English language. You can't say words like that. But as a poet, I could create up a word now and just think out of it and say, oh yeah, and just use it in my poem. I'm like, yeah, this is poetic license. I can basically do whatever I want with words. Same thing I think of when I think of performance license. So I feel the messenger is as important, if not more important, than the message itself. What that means is that if I think of all the big writers. If they were to read their poem, there is this depth it gives to the reading, because it's the person who wrote the if William Shakespeare was alive now and to read any of his work, no matter how terrible he read it or no matter how thick the accent was, there's just this depth that, oh, it's William Shakespeare, is the one who wrote the book, and is the one that's reading this, that it gives to it, versus someone who is an actor. I'm so sorry, I'm not trying to talk to you, but
No,
someone
that
who's
was
an
my
actor,
point.
who's a voice actor, who's really trained at reading out things, and they read out the story. It's just different, right? I would rather much more listen to William Shakespeare, the writer of the story, read it, even though the guy might be terrible at, voice acting and all that, right? And same thing with stories. The messenger gives depth to the message.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I suppose to play devil's advocate, or at least to speak to the utility of third parties, of actors in the mix, is that there is at least then an option that other individual can bring something else. And in the same way that if I look at a painting that I didn't paint, hopefully I would take something away from it that perhaps the painter could never have thought of. But it doesn't matter. Something of value has been received by me, has been taken away. And good acting, I mean, acting is an interpretive art. It's not technically a creative art. If I'm given a script, I didn't write it. I didn't come up with the idea. I've been hired because I kind of I look like the policeman or whatever, and I could believably be that person. I suppose with particularly with theatre and with film and television, there comes a point where it's good that one person could create a whole world on the page, but then we can people it with lots of other individuals that we could try to imagine. I mean, that is really the difference between sort of what I would call sort of typical narrative stories, films, movies, whatever, and poetry, is that poetry really, as I understand it, really is a singular voice, and so could be given to a singular person, or it could be really the writer. But that show you mentioned at the beginning, I don't know how many tens or hundreds of characters there are in it. I mean, it might have been interesting to see a one-man show of whoever wrote it doing all the parts, and we know there are lots of one-man Shakespeare shows out there, but it's something else, I suppose. So it's as an actor, I'm very much an interpreter, which is why this project was fun. That I'm not an interpreter; I am the author as well. I
beg to differ that acting is just an interpretive art. The reason I say this is that have you ever been? How many languages do you speak?
Oh, I'd say about 1.5.
Okay. The reason I ask this, the reason I ask that question is because I don't know if you've ever been in a gathering where someone is speaking, right? And they say a joke, but an interpreter is interpreting. And the interpreter interprets what they said, but the joke doesn't follow. It's lost in translation. And so the audience doesn't laugh. And you're like, but this thing is actually funny. The interpreter just lost that. So it will take creativity, because sometimes in order to maybe interpret what they said, the joke will get lost in translation. So the question is, how do you actually interpret it such that the audience, they actually laugh and they actually get the joke? And that itself is creative.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'm an intermediary. When I was doing my training as an actor, one of the most important things I learned was that I'm a conduit between two worlds, as it were. There's the world of the story, the writer, the characters, maybe a world of people that don't even exist, right? Hamlet never really existed, but he's real in the sense that the things he says are real. They are the poetry, the prose as well of Shakespeare is so evergreen because it speaks to things that we know are true, even though nobody ever actually said those things, or those people never really existed. I stand between that sort of misty kairos space and the world of actual real flesh and blood people sat in the audience. And I have to find a way to take what's coming from there and properly interpret it. And that's I wouldn't be talking the profession down to say that it's only interpretive.
No, of course,
as you say, interpretation is really, really difficult. And translation and interpretation, exactly as you said, then they're not the same thing. I'm British, but I live in the Czech Republic. That's
Okay.
my half other language is Czech. And when I watch, if I'm watching, say, a British or an American film and there are Czech subtitles, my Czech is good enough now that I can compare what was said with how it was translated.
And you're
And
like,
as exactly as you said, if I'm watching a comedy, particularly, as you said, again, with jokes are really, really hard, right? Very, very often, the good translators, they also interpret in that the joke is completely different because they understand their audience. They've understood the source material, but they've also understood their audience. And they
yeah.
know that this wordplay just doesn't work. So they completely rewrite the joke. They just write a different joke that they hope it will give the same vibe or get the same laugh, but it's
Yeah.
not the same joke. And that's true interpretation rather than pure translation. That's where I hope we do better than AI. That AI maybe doesn't quite have that level of reference base and understanding who it's talking to, also as well as the source that it's coming from. If that makes sense.
Yeah. 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 The reason I brought that up is, I've seen certain movies, right? That are they have multiple movies of probably a folk tale, right? They make different movies by different persons, and you hear someone say, "I preferred the movie that was acted by so and so actor." Right, that's the better one I prefer, right? And you watch the movie and you see that it's clear that even though it's the same storyline by different actors, but this
Yeah.
one is just different. Like it feels different, and that's
Yeah.
where the creativity comes in. How do you actually embody it such that I forget that I'm watching a movie?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is free. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I should be crying. Why did he die?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's why every time I hit a villain in the movie, and I'm like, that guy really finished work, because certain villains, right? You're like, oh, the guy is just playing a bad guy. And some you're like, this guy is so wicked, even though he's acting a movie.
Yeah. 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 That's why villains are so much fun to play as well. We get to go to those places that as nice people we can't.
Yeah, yeah. You worked on the podcast, you wrote the stories, and this was you exploring what I like to call new territory, right? For a lot of persons,
Yeah.
I was doing an interview for a different one of my other podcasts, and we're celebrating this month as the month of have a go month, right? So continuous learning, right? It's about trying things, and even though you've never done them before, and right now, I know you would want to argue otherwise, but you're a writer and you have a portfolio of
Yeah, I guess so.
stories to prove
I got to give you
otherwise.
that.
To prove otherwise, I listened to it, and of course, your experience as an actor carried on to the stories. But I listened to it and I was like, wow. What's the word? Okay, let me create a word for the experience. I was flower whelmed. I was like, wow.
Okay. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah. Well, that's that. I'm flattered.
Okay, I have the poetic license. I just mixed the word flabbergasted and overwhelmed together, and I'm like, yeah,
I like
I was
it.
flabberwhelmed. I'm looking at the manual, and what was I'm still trying to see what was the prompt behind that. Would be the one, right?
Which story?
Oh, this one is from writerswrite.coza.
Yes. So
Okay.
Manual, the first story. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the prompt behind this one?
It was just the word manual. So unlike yours, the prompts for the stories I wrote this year, it was literally just a list of 31 words. Maybe there were phrases, maybe 2 or 3 words, but no more than that. It was far less in depth than yours.
Yeah.
And I just printed these 31 words and I stuck them on the inside of the cover of the notebook that I was writing in, so that was my reference each day. Yeah.
Oh, I feel like I should play it, but I'm like, nah, we don't have copyright license to play it. So if you want to listen to the work we've been talking about in the episode, you can go to 31 Stories. If I say 31 Stories, I don't know if you change the name in the future, but right now the name of the podcast is 31 Stories.
Yes, 31 Stories. Yeah.
Oh.
The number 31 Stories. Yeah, exactly. Which might not have been the best name for it, actually, because I think it might get lost. It doesn't quite stand out.
Yeah,
in the way that
it's more than 31 Stories
lost.
now. So the original premise of the podcast has changed.
Yes, I
But
suppose. Yeah, now it's going to be 62. Yeah.
then when it's 92, it's going to be 92. When it's
Yeah.
100, it's going to be 100. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, we'll see where it goes. I quite like just being in the flow of I've got my rhythm. I'll record sort of 4, 5, 6 in one session, and then over the next few weeks, I typically edit in that week, ready to release it on Sunday. Um,
Yeah.
but
When
yeah, we'll see how it goes.
when a lot of writers write, I think one of the big signs of validation, right? I use the word validation from most writers,
Mm.
getting published. Okay, I'll paint a scenario. If you're in a meeting or in a gathering and like, oh yeah, I'm a writer. Or if, as an actor, you should know this, right? Oh, you're like, I'm an actor. I'm like, oh, have I seen
Yeah,
any of your movies? And they're
yeah,
like, oh, I don't think
yeah,
so. What movies have you been on? Right? Same thing as a writer. And they're like, oh, have I read any of your work? I'm like, what book did
yeah,
you write? What did you write? And oh, I've been published on the New Yorker, the Granta, and all that. And I'm like, yeah, and people are like, oh, it's legit. But I feel like we could what's the word? We could bypass the middleman of getting your work out there and actually
mm,
create the work and put it out there and allow the listeners judge and say, oh, this work is actually good or this work is not good, which is not a problem because it means that the work is not for you, right?
yeah,
Now, having the work as a podcast is actually published because the thing is, if you were to submit some of those works as writing, most magazines will not accept it because they're like, oh, it's already published on the internet.
right.
How's that, what's the word? How's that changed or influenced your work? Because I'm curious, you're a voice actor and you've read your own stories on the podcast. Have you used that as part of your portfolio?
That really was the sort of very rational excuse I gave to myself to why I should make this
Yeah.
podcast in the first place, because it has been a lot of work, and I'm quite busy as it is. So why would I do this thing to myself other than I was going to get something out of it? And so at the very base level, I thought, you know what? It's the internet. Nobody listens or watches anything that anybody puts on the internet. Trying to get any attention is an absolute nightmare. So at the very least, I'll have this portfolio that if somebody comes looking for a voice artist, like, I can say, well, just check out my podcast. You can listen to what it sounds like if I was to read your book, let's say.
Yeah.
But for the writing, you talked about new territory. That was really the key for that. At the beginning, I had no idea of making this podcast. I had no idea that I had really had no ambitions for the writing at all beyond doing it. I listened to one of your earlier podcasts, and you talked about how writers don't read about writing, writers don't talk about writing. I'm paraphrasing. Writers
I
write.
remember the episode. I remember the episode.
Yeah. That's writer's right. And I
Yeah.
think I talked about it a lot. I said, I'd love the idea to maybe write my own story. I've got all these ideas, and maybe I'll read a book about it. Maybe I'll watch a YouTube video about it. Maybe I'll listen to a podcast about it. And I thought, well, no, come on, why don't you actually just do it? And it's very daunting. One of my stories, I think it might be the very last story. The very last of your prompts. I think the prompt was beginnings. I think is the last prompt.
Let me even check.
Very poetic of you, of course. I think it's beginnings. And I ended up writing a story about a woman who just, it's not clear exactly what happens, but she sort of walks out of her job, walks out of her normal life, and just decides she wants to become a painter. And it's about the very awkward, tentative step she makes to actually sit in front of her. It was obviously me reflecting on the whole process after 31 days of writing all of these stories. She sat staring at this ever blank canvas, and it sort of makes her very angry. But the anger makes her do something, and then she's painting, and then she's off, and then it's happening, right?
Yeah. I see the prompt.
And I think, was it beginnings?
Yeah, it's beginning. Yeah, the new idea was
beginning.
starting over.
And I think that for me, it was really just about getting off the line. I just needed to do something. And that's why I was very grateful for the prompts, because they really helped with that. And I set the goal of 1,000 words a day, and I decided they were going to be short stories and blah, 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 blah. But actually just having a reason, setting a goal, it purely was a kind of what would you call it? It'd be like, picking up weights on January the 1st or starting a new
Yeah, New
diet.
Year
It was like, no, I'm going
resolution.
to
Yeah,
write some stuff. I'm going to do it. And a month seems reasonable. I'm not going to turn myself into a published short story author.
yeah,
Can I write 31,000 words in a month? Because that'll be a hell of an achievement in and of
yeah.
itself.
That's a lot.
And I got to the end of it and I went, great, that's it. And then I totally forgot about it, as I said, for a whole year.
Yeah,
And then I thought, oh crikey, it's January again already, or it's Christmas. Am I going to do it again? And enough time had passed. I'd kind of had enough of a rest to go back to it again. But the idea of worrying about publishing and all of that kind of stuff, I really, it didn't even occur to me. To me, the value was in the work, which sounds so self-important, but the value to me was in the discipline and the practice and the exploration and the new territory. That was the value for me. Knowing full well that having had almost no experience, what came out was probably not going to be very good. And so just doing it, writing the words every day, that really was the goal. And so I'm fortunate to have another life, to have another career, have other things that I do. That writing was there purely as an exploration, an experimentation, pleasure, and something I could look back on and go, wow, I did that. Even though I read some of them and I go, oh God, that one's a little bit, this one drags a bit, or God, what the hell was I talking about here? As I'm sure you know.
Okay. Why am I laughing? The reason I'm laughing is the prompts. It sounded like the project itself was the prompt, because I'm looking at the prompts right now, and from what you said so far, one of the prompts is beginning, which is you starting something new, right? The idea of starting over, the challenges that comes with it. Another one of the prompts is cascade, right? It's about flow. It describes a scene where there's a significant change or a symbolic change or renewal. Another one
that
is
was one of my favorite stories, actually. Just at the end, the cascade. That because I don't remember all the prompts, but I do remember that was probably one of the stories I was most proud of. So it's interesting that you mentioned that one.
Okay, and then there's echo. There was a moment when the character's actions or words come back to them like an echo, prompting deep reflection. And when you talked about, I should just write a story. Like, why am I trying to do other things that look so right in order than writing itself? And I'm like, well, what's going on? Is though you're leaving out the prompts, even though it's meant the stories you leave them out. It's crazy, because recently I was just going through some of the movies I watched, and I noticed that some actors don't have what I like to call range, right? They're good. It's not like they're terrible actors, but I've seen actors where I watched one of their movie, they played great role, and I watch another movie and I'm like, are you sure it's the same guy that I watched this movie? Because the way he just finished the role, he doesn't look or sound anything like the guy from this other movie. And sometimes I just feel like some actors are just playing their role, but reading out the script and doing a job on it. And the fact that you worked on this story and podcast, I feel like it gives you range in terms of portfolio wise, because when people reach out to you and say, well, I've worked on the podcast, I've written this, and I've right. So when people come up with crazy, audacious ideas of things that are not quote unquote traditional, they can say, he has explored new territories and he did a great job on it. So we can work with him.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And I love working with my voice, particularly as an actor. I mean, that would go for a lot of actors, but I've always enjoyed voice stuff. I've always enjoyed radio plays and radio sketch comedy, and I work a lot in video games, actually, which is a really wonderful blend of physical and voice work, doing motion capture, performance capture work. And also what's great about that is you do get to play some really, really bizarre things. I mean, you can play creatures that don't exist. You can play animals. I played the last video game I worked on. I played a bird. I played a raven, a speaking raven. And I think I got that job because I spend so much time messing around with my voice. And I like doing impressions, and why not do an impression of a bird? And So I did have fun, even on this project. There's nothing quite as crazy as that in the stories, but I'm playing men and women from different places with different accents, different ages. And the novel I mentioned that my friend wrote, there was a huge cast of characters, and that was a very interesting challenge, trying to, how do you differentiate between these 30, 40 people across this novel such that we can follow it and remember who they are.
Yeah.
I hope that it can show range. I think if I have any strength of range, it is in my voice work, which is why I naturally felt most comfortable doing this project as it is. But if you see me, you'd think policeman. So that's the. It doesn't always work.
Why do I not think? Why do I not think police? I probably think of bouncer.
Bouncer, I get. Yeah, bouncer, gangster, policeman. Yeah, if anybody's only listening to this podcast, I'm a larger, bald, bearded man. So naturally, I've never been in a proper fight in my life, but I always end up playing people who do end up getting into violent scraps.
Well, the work. Have you ever thought about writing stories and then turning those stories into radio plays, and then of course that would involve a lot of production and acoustic explore. It can be done, right? It's not impossible. It can be done.
Yeah.
But have you ever thought about that?
I have, and I did try things straight out of university with friends, but I mean, things have come on a long way. It's been a long time since I was at university, but absolutely, I think if I was to expand the boundaries of that undiscovered territory, it probably would be, well, how can I build? I've got the stories, I've got the audiobook thing down. So why don't we create a soundscape? Why don't we try and do something that's more visual in the sense of the mind's eye, the theater of the mind, right? I think that would be very fun. Yeah.
For me, the three parts, I think I have never produced a radio play, but I think the three core parts would be, if you get a producer who do the sound effects, who can also multitask as the sound guy and all that, and someone writes the play, which could be you, and you might need a couple of other characters to depend on the number of characters in the play, which would not be a problem if the play has maybe 2 or 3 characters. Most short stories, they don't have, it's not like a fantasy book that has 60, 70, 80, 100 characters. I'm like, it's usually just 1, 2, 3 persons. Sometimes it's just in a room and that's it, right? And so it would require maybe a couple of persons to voice that. And that shouldn't be a problem for you with all your connections in the acting industry.
No, probably not, actually. Probably not. But it's interesting, going back to what you said earlier, at that point then, I would start to think, well, who's going to listen to this? I'd be getting ahead of myself and thinking about, and that's the danger. That could end up then becoming a block to actually making it, because that would be something, not that I'm not proud of the podcast, I'm not proud of my stories. There was never that ambition of really getting it, to go anywhere. But something like a radio play, what have I lost you? What have lost you?
My laptop was connected to the Wi-Fi. For some reason, it seems the network is stronger on my phone. It's just, I'm glad we're almost done.
Okay. Yeah, you look better. I mean, you look great before, but you look even better now. Interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I'm using the camera from my
better
phone.
Camera.
The other one was from my laptop. Okay.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
So, you were responding to the question, the radio play and all that. And the part I didn't really get to ask you is, what is the listenership, the reception of the podcast? Have you been promoting the podcast or talking about it?
I haven't really promoted it, actually. I think, I guess, part of my feeling of, I don't know, does it really deserve to be talked about? Should I really, who's going to listen to this thing? I just kind of put it out there. And so there isn't a huge listenership. Although in recent months, again, it's great you brought up this topic, expanding my area of moving into more unknown territory. I've actually started experimenting with live streaming, playing video games on the internet, and content creation.
You're talking about you start live streaming and going into content creation, and
yes,
you did mention you don't have a huge number, but I'm curious. The podcast I made is curious to know, what's the number like?
I think the last time I looked, there's about, I'd say each episode probably, oh God, quick maths. Probably each episode gets about
That's a
20
lot. That's a lot.
plays
That's a lot.
on
That's a
average,
lot.
but some of them have had a lot, and some of them have had not very many. So the first episode got a lot more. Is that a lot?
No, no, I'm not saying it
I'm
to like,
yeah.
boost your ego, but that's a lot. A lot of podcasters. That's the reason why a lot of podcasters quit,
Okay.
because some of them they just talking and releasing the episode and nobody's listening. And for a point in time, that feels really, really it's devastating, because you're like just talking and speaking to the void. 20,
Absolutely.
20 listeners, that's like 20 persons, listen to you perform. I mean, you do that if you had an audience of 20, would you?
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that's a really nice way of thinking about it. And actually, funnily, when I stream, it's quite often I'll have sort of 15 to 20
we
people
don't know
watching. And
about
again, I think it doesn't seem like many, but a lot of them are talking to me in the chat. And if there were 20 of them in this room right now, I would feel like I was really being listened to. But the reason I mention it is that I've used, because one of the video games I worked on recently has quite an active fan base, and I've been trying to jump onto that bandwagon. Started streaming, and I've started I've been talking about the podcast to those people as well, and it's sort of, there's a little trickle of increase, but as I said, it's my writing. I really wasn't trying to make anything with it. For me, the process has really been what's been joyful about it. But of course, if I can get more listeners, if I can get more people interested in the stories, then that's great. But for me, I'll be able to look back on it, and I like listening to I listen to my own podcast. I like listening to it. I think it's, like I say, these are stories that I wrote that I thought that I would want to read and potentially would want to listen to as well. And they're 10 minutes each, if that. So it's a very low investment for me. So yeah. But it's all about, you know this better than anyone, I'm sure. It's all about cross-platform, cross-pollination, try and catch people in different places and send them back to other places. That's the world we live in now, I guess.
Wow.
We're all PR men.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where this work goes to. Probably maybe in 2, 3, 6 months we might do a part two of the show. To just see, okay, yeah, what happened since then, and how have you pivoted and changed things a bit. Um, if
No.
listeners want to learn more about this podcast and connect with you, where can they do that?
So I normally direct people to the podcast. So it's called 31 Stories, 31 Stories. It's hosted on Spotify, but it's everywhere you can find. I think I've set it up that it's everywhere where you can get podcasts. And from there is a link tree in the show notes. So the first 31 episodes, your website is listed, the post, the prompts is listed, but there's also a link tree which will send people to my Instagram and my YouTube and all of that kind of stuff. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. Follow on all the socials. But yeah, because I think on Spotify you can comment on episodes, right? Nobody's done that, but I think I mentioned it in my bonus episode that if people want to get in touch, if they've come to me through the podcast, that's probably the simplest way. Otherwise, to look for James Beaumont on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and all of that stuff. Well, I'm JM Bo as a Twitcher, as a Twitch streamer. I'm JM Bo. That's my handle. But yeah, if you find the podcast, you'll find the link tree and it's all there. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, James. It's really excited. I'm really excited, and I'm happy that I got to interview you. And I'm really happy you reached out to me, because you just, at the moment I saw what you did with the work, I just started having some crazy ideas of things I could possibly work on. Thank you so much, James.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. And yeah, I'd love to come back if we can see how things have developed. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
I'll put all the links that James mentioned in the description and the show notes, so listeners can just click and go directly to the site. Once again, thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight to chat with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Buildwriting. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and share it with a friend who loves poetry and creative writing. Leave us a quick review or rating. It really helps others find the show. You can also connect with me, and I'd love for you to subscribe to the newsletter. Saying all the behind the scenes things I'm experimenting on and things I'm working on in terms of creative writing. Yeah, it'll mean a lot to me. And I shared the writing prompts, behind the scenes, peaks, and more. Yeah, a lot of things. And if you have any questions or ideas, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be sure to respond. Love to hear from you. Next week, we'll be diving into something really, really amazing. And you have to tune in next week to find out what that will be. Until next time, keep writing, keep building your craft. See you next time.